Hello, one and all. Welcome to this presentation that I'm doing on behalf of ACM Global Laboratories. I'm Mira Doig from ABS Laboratories, and I'm the Bioanalytical Technical Director. Right, today I'm actually going to cover some of the areas that I think are very important, and that is the risks of the lack of regulation of using cannabidiol in vaping devices, and how we at ACM Global Laboratories can help you increase the information you have about these products, both in efficacy and safety of this route of administration. I will then overview the experience we have quantifying a range of cannabinoids in biological fluids. And finally, I will tell you about ACM capabilities of supporting any clinical trial worldwide, and they have been doing this since 1975. Right, to go into my hobby horse, cannabidiol and vaping. And the reason for my hobby horse is because we have supported a lot of work on nicotine and e-cigarettes and e-cigarette devices. As we all know, there are many historical reports indicating that cannabis-based extracts containing a whole host of cannabinoids, including CBD, have therapeutic properties. But to date, the only registered medicine is Epidiolex. Now, Epidiolex is an oral solution for severe epilepsy in children. And unfortunately, the bioavailability of CBD via this oral route is only about 6%. Over the years, recreational use has indicated that CBD is safe and likely to have many therapeutic uses. And we also know the pharmacological effects of the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis-based extracts, tetrahydrocannabinol or THC, is also highly bioavailable when smoking, and it increases the bioavailability of cannabinoids at least to 30%. Unfortunately, to date, there's no records or reports in the literature of any bioavailability or clinical studies using vaping devices. But there is a whole host of CBD e-liquids commercially available worldwide, and also people are using any sort of vaping device to administer these CBD liquids, and these are normally developed for nicotine administration rather than CBD. So as I've just said, there is a whole host of commercial interest in preparing CBD vaping fluids. But there's very little or no regulations covering the production of these fluids, what solvents you're allowed to add to these fluids, or their associated delivery devices. In contrast, the Food Standards Agency has just given CBD companies a deadline of the end of March to have a validated novel food application submitted for each of their products if they've added CBD to foods or drinks. After this date, only products that have been thoroughly tested and applied for this application will be allowed to remain on the market. And I'm sure very soon that vaping fluids will have similar sort of regulations. Now, why is this? Well, basically, cannabidiol is very unstable and is prone to oxidation, even in alcoholic solutions. The red molecules on the structure associated on this slide is hydroxyl groups, and these are where they're oxidated both for light and temperature sensitivity. And in some solutions, especially if there's any aqueous present, CBD can break down to a myriad of compounds in a matter of days. And also, what's the stability like when you've added all these additives that people are adding to these e-fluids, such as vitamin E, acetate, and various flavors, etc. One group in Italy looked at the CBD content in 13 commercially available e-liquids. What they did was they examined how the content matched the label, and also they did an experiment of the stability of CBD in the solvent. The main solvent, they said, of all these products was propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. But unfortunately, they didn't mention in this publication what other additives were added to these e-fluids. The CBD concentration in the individual fluids ranged from 10 to 100 milligram per mil. And here are some of the results where they assayed the CBD content in these 13 e-fluids. Unfortunately, 5 of the samples were underestimated for their CBD content, and it ranged from 11 to 92%. 5 of the samples were within plus or minus 10%, and another 3 were overestimated for the CBD content by 13 to 17%. Now, at the moment, what you should have in labels is that the concentration matches the actual content of the material within plus or minus 2%. So basically, all 13 products did not meet these regulatory guidelines. Then they conducted their stability experiment, looking at stability either refrigerated, room temperature, or at 37 degrees. And you can see for the data on this slide that really refrigerated storage was the best way of storing these e-fluids, as the CBD content within a month only decreased by about 5%, whereas the decrease of CBD content increased with increasing temperature. In addition, light instability was demonstrated. Yet, on any of these e-fluids, there was no recommendation on the label to store refrigerated or in the dark. They were even given expiry dates of 12 months, but goodness knows what the content of CBD or the other materials in these e-fluids was like at the end of that 12 months. I'm sure there was no formal stability data done on that. And the vials that some of these are prepared in, not only are they clear glass rather than brown glass, they don't recommend storing in the dark. So, as I've mentioned before, there really is a whole host of lack of regulation of these fluids, even though they're commercially available. There's also a lack of control of the vaping devices to deliver these fluids and how this affects the health of the users. There's no published data on the bioavailability of CBD with differing vaping temperatures or devices. People just seem to be using nicotine vaping devices, and I know our experience with measuring the bioavailability of nicotine, that it can be affected with various designs of vaping temperatures and devices. No one's actually demonstrated medical efficacy using vaping devices either. And none of the devices are registered as a medical device to deliver CBD. Increasingly, over the last year, there have been lots of deaths registered and lung damage in people vaping with cannabinoids. And this appears to be far higher than any of the nicotine e-liquids. So again, this is all evidence that we must start to regulate CBD vaping fluids. Now, how can partnering with ACM help you with getting a strategic advantage of getting some data on the bioavailability and safety of your vaping solutions, or developing a vaping device specifically for CBD? First of all, we can support your bioavailability studies so that you can generate a device that is designed to efficiently deliver CBD. And then after you've done that, you can conduct clinical studies to obtain both safety and efficacy data for CBD or any of the other cannabinoids as well. So this is what we call adding value to your cannabinoid containing product. ABS is a division of ACM Global Laboratories, and we have experience assaying a variety of cannabinoids, such as CBD, CBDV, and THCV. Now, the structure on this side is actually of THC, and THCV is actually the C3 hydrocarbon rather than the C5 hydrocarbon shown on this structure. We also have an off-the-shelf assay to assay CBD, THC, and 11-hydroxy-THC in plasma to support regulatory preclinical and clinical studies. And we have the experience of supporting various cutting-edge therapeutics such as Sativex through the whole R&D process. Other areas that we have supported in the past and can support in the future is looking at cannabinoids in food, drinks, cosmetics, and other topical products. As I've mentioned before, we have this off-the-shelf assay for CBD, THC, and the pharmacologically active metabolite of THC, 11-hydroxy-THC. Initially, the assay was using gas chromatography mass spectrometry, but as the technology advanced, we have now transferred this assay to liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry using the latest mass spectrometer from AB Science. We have a method that's validated from 50 picograms to 100 nanogram per mil. Now, many people ask me, well, what does that mean in real situation? And why do you need this highly sophisticated equipment to measure these levels? Well, basically, 1 nanogram per mil is equivalent to 2 bottles of wine in all the world's oceans, which is why it's really looking for a needle in a haystack when you're quantifying these low levels in biological fluids. Hence, you need this technology and sophisticated methods to actually measure these compounds. We've also got stability, so we can advise you on how to collect the samples, store the samples, and ship them for analysis. Other assays that we've got are for measuring the major metabolite in urine of THC, which is 11-carboxy-THC. And we've supported quite a bit of research into comparing cannabinoid administration to the known endocannabinoids in our plasma. It is thought that in several illnesses and things, our endocannabinoid levels decrease, which is why things like CBD help. So we have assays for anandamide and 2-AG. These are the endocannabinoids that are known to be effective in our body. Right, so all I've got on this slide is really a case study of how we supported Sativex for GW Pharmaceuticals. Now, Sativex is another cannabinoid that is registered on the market. It was registered by the European Medical Agency in 2010 for the help in multiple sclerosis for spasticity, i.e. the tightening of muscles that happens in multiple sclerosis, and also for use in cancer pain. So as you can see from this slide, we have supported multiple preclinical and clinical studies all the way through to registration of this medicine. So with all this experience, how can we support vaping studies? Well, our chemists are dedicated in providing exceptional services and information and assurances. We have reliable cannabinoid assays that are validated to FDA and EMA guidance. We can also give you guidance regarding sample collection, as it's easy to contaminate the samples, especially when you're doing inhalation or topical administration studies. And once we've got the samples and we've assayed them, we can give you the results and interpret the data for you. In addition, what we can do is give you the whole service of supplying you with sample collection kits, logistics, and central laboratory services. And in the next few slides, I'm going to go into more detail of how we can support the whole clinical study for you. As I've just mentioned, we have complete central laboratory services from sample draw, sample receipt, to sample analysis, results reporting, and storage of samples. And what can we do with these samples when we've got them? Well, as I've mentioned before, we can analyze the cannabinoids, and we've got a lot of PK bioanalysis experience over the last 20 years in our PK lab, which is good laboratory practice and good clinical practice accredited. So we've actually analysed all sorts of different pharmaceutical products in this laboratory. In addition, if you're looking at how efficacious a cannabinoid is in a particular area, such as pain or inflammation. For example, CBD is thought to be anti-inflammatory. So what you can do with your samples is we can look at the levels of inflammatory cytokines in these samples, both before and after administration of CBD. So you've actually got some physical data to back up what you think it is good for. In this slide, I've also summarized our experience in nicotine and smoking, and why we really feel that the time has come that people must look at more regulation and analysis around CBD and vaping. And in the last column, I've also summarized what our central laboratory can do for you as far as safety testing. So here is just a slide showing the company history. ACM was actually formed in 1975 and has gradually expanded both geographically as well as functionally by strategic acquisition over the years. And the PK laboratory, ABS, was actually acquired in June 2018. This slide just shows you the global footprint of ACM Global Laboratories. You can see we have worldwide coverage, but the two main laboratory facilities are actually in York in the UK and in Rochester, New York State in the US. And we have other facilities in India, Singapore and China. And this is our values, our corporate values that are called EPIC. Basically, we want to get things right first time, every time. And people are our priority, whether they be patients, customers, partners, or our own team members. We try and be high in integrity and transparency when we're talking with everybody, so that we can build trust with our customers and give you confidence in working with us. And like I've done today, we like to challenge the status quo and hopefully educate and innovate for the good of clinical development. So my little presentation has come to the end. Hopefully I've highlighted to you the lack of pharmacokinetic information for CBD, especially when it's administered via the vaping route. So if you feel that you want any more information, please ask me now, or do not hesitate to go to our booth and speak to our colleagues. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.